All right, Brian, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing well, my friend. Just trying to keep up with all the craziness of life. I was just thinking today that my daughters are all grown. One's going to be 20 and one's going to be 17. And I thought I'd have all this extra time now that they're kind of on their own. One's in college and one in high school, but it just seems like there's not enough hours in the day. So went to the gym, had some dinner, and now I'm talking to two of my favorite people. So life's good.
I can commiserate with you there, buddy. And Phil can probably tell us about if life gets easier when his daughters get older. Phil, welcome back, bud.
Hey, it's great to be back. It's great to be back. Big change since episode 36. We did that from Spokane, Washington, which was our move from Alaska to Spokane, and now I'm actually at the farm. My wife and I are at the farm full time, and I've actually got something in common with both of you when it comes to the kids. So I've got teenage daughters that are graduated college, and we thought when we left Alaska that we were basically done with Alaska, but one of our daughters actually moved back. So the Alaska part of our life hasn't completely left yet. In fact, Haley's getting married in the spring, so we'll be going back up in June. And then, of course, my girls are twins. So, and Jared and I have that in common. So,
Right.
I got you both covered.
Yeah, I heard a rumor by somebody way smarter than me that the best habitat managers have twins. So I think maybe Brian, you're right there. I'm not including Brian, but I just totally made that up. Yours are a lot older, and they yours know how to shoot guns very well and hunt and everything else. And Brian had his in the outdoors as well. And I'm trying to be like you guys and just expose and keep doing that. Even I picked them up from dance tonight, so they're dancing too. All the girl stuff.
Nice. Well, I can tell you that a teenage girl that knows how to handle and clear and or shoot a gun definitely intimidates teenage boys, especially ones that don't. So
Awesome.
Even knowing how to change their own oil will do that today.
Absolutely. That's no kidding.
That'll go for half the men too, Brian, if not more.
No kidding, huh?
Well, Phil, you teased us a little bit. You said it's been a long time since episode 36. Yes, sir. You were on number 36. We had you on. For anybody who hasn't heard that episode yet, I urge you to go back. At the time, it was one of our high-flying episodes. Probably still is. And a couple of things we talked about there was, your farm that you're sitting on now. We covered all about that. We covered different consultants that you had out there, property do's and don'ts, how to manage property from, a country away. Mock scrapes, buck bedding. So we talked about a bunch of really, really awesome stuff on that one. So I urge everybody to go back, episode 36. But now we have you back, and things have changed for you a little bit in terms of what you're up to. So let's hear a little bit, just kind of a quick bio on who you are and what you're up to these days, just in case somebody hasn't gone back to that episode yet.
So grew up on the West Coast in the mountains of Northern California, went to Alaska in the Air Force right out of high school. Met my wife, Jennifer, who grew up in the area where we live now. She was up there on an internship. We came back to Indiana about a year later, got married, had a set of twins that we raised in Alaska. And when they decided to leave Alaska to go to college, they both settled on Boise State, and being on the Boise State shooting team. Sporting clays was something that they both really enjoyed all the way through middle school and high school. Now they've both graduated, and like I said, one of them followed the boyfriend back to Alaska, and they're settled and happy. And Jesse actually stayed in Boise, and so Jennifer and I are happily settled here at the farm. We built a newer, bigger barn that's got a garage, we'll call it, to put the tractor and the four-wheeler. And then I've got a section of the barn that will be kind of a designated wood shop, and then an area that we're actually living in now that will eventually be the man cave once the house is built. So we got in here, got settled. The world kind of went crazy with COVID and everything, and building prices went up, and we were content and weren't feeling like living in a little efficiency apartment was, going to put us into a divorce or anything. So we waited a while to start building, and with any luck, we should start building soon.
And
Ready?
I see she let you decorate the place too. We're doing this on video again, and I see a nice grizzly. I see a nice whitetail. Or maybe that's a brown bear, actually.
A lot of guys don't believe me when I say that for a lot of years, the only reason I've got rugs made or antlers hung up or things like that is because Jennifer's always been super proud of my achievements and almost insisted that I do it. To be honest, I'm happy with a nice 8x10 of the moment that captures it, but and we'll probably do more of that now. But I've got a mountain goat rug and a black bear and a brown bear rug, and they're all because my lovely wife thought they were beautiful and she wanted them. She wanted to enjoy them. So. Awesome. And it wasn't like you can have this little space up here to put one deer head and a squirrel rug, but that's it. That's all the space you get. So we've actually designed the great room in our house with high ceilings on one end to put a couple of moose racks, a sheep European, and some a handful of Africa European mounts. So it'd be kind of cool. A nice little collection of a variety from, over a lot of years. So
very cool. Yeah, I'd like to see that mountain goat rug. That's pretty neat.
It's pretty unique. Yeah. It's balled up in a plastic bag inside of a plastic bag in a box somewhere up on the shelf right now. But hopefully in a year and a half, something like that, will be most of our household goods, our furniture, the stuff out of the curio cabinet, the rest of the dishes and pots and pans, most of that stuff still in boxes from Alaska, actually.
Well, don't let it get wet, which you're doing great at, and it's on the upper floor. You're good. You're good for now.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I wanted to get you on. Well, we've been talking about getting you on again for I think 3 years, and a couple of different subjects we're going to cover, and we're going to have you on again and talk about that gentleman the Pope and Young gentleman, the archer that we talked about before, and keep having you on. Well, because also you're part of the HP land manager team, so you are one of the guys that we thought would be a great fit. I remember when I called you with the idea, cruising down the highway, and
that's right.
I just passed through Terre Haute, and you were like, if you don't stop here next time you pass through here, I'm gonna kick your butt. I'm like, yeah, that's
right.
So I did the next time, but that day I remember pitching this idea to you, and you were on board, and I think you're a great fit for the team. Southern Indiana is where you're located, right?
Correct.
So let's hear a little bit about, let's see, where do I want to go with this? I think we should hear kind of your little bit of your habitat history as part of who you are, and then we'll get into kind of your outlook and that sort of thing.
Okay. So when we bought the place in 2012. We were living in Anchorage. So, from 2012 on, whenever we left Alaska, it was almost, short of, going to see family or something, pretty much we came to the farm, and we had a little efficiency apartment built into the old barn that we stayed in. And, I'd come and work on food plots if the timing was right. And back then I thought, food plots were the answer to deer hunting. But how the whole habitat thing started was a good friend of mine that was actually buying this place. He was responsible for us actually getting it. He knew a guy really well that was having Jim Ward do a bunch of habitat work on his property. And the guy's actually, it's a stone's throw from here. I mean, I could be at his place in 5 minutes. And so long story short, Jim came, highly recommended. I heard that, he traveled all over the Midwest working on people's property, and he made buck beds, and, basically he made deer more predictable and, more predictable to harvest, that kind of thing. So anyway, I talked to Jim, and basically, long story short, I ended up spending a couple of days working with him on this property that was just around the corner from the house. And then on the third day, he and I worked at my place specifically. And we started by, walking the property and looking and talking about areas that needed improvement. And the day basically ended with 2 places where, in his opinion, bucks were already bedding, and the techniques that he was using at the time, I'm not really sure how much they've changed since then, maybe not much, but we basically used the techniques that he was using back then to enhance those locations and make them more desirable. And Jim was the guy who really got me thinking about, habitat improvement and really looking at the fine details. Why is the buck bedding here? And from here, why is he leaving and going this direction and headed towards food? And I mean, Jim could, bend over and get down and show you where a deer was nibbling on, this forb or this brush or something. He'd say, he's probably getting out of his bed and he's going this direction because you can see he's rubbing on the trees, and, this bush has been, chewed down and hasn't been allowed to grow and get big for years because, this is the path. And so all these things just started clicking with me. And then by the time we were done at the end of the day, I really realized that what the property really needed. I mean, I had the farm 77 acres and probably 2/3 of it's timbered. And by the time I was done with Jim, what I realized was the property really needed to be logged. I had the typical park woods where, you'd take a 4-wheeler and start into the property on one end and you could see the deer running out of the property on the other. So I had it logged away. I had Don Higgins. I had read Don Higgins' book and was kind of fascinated by just kind of his attention to detail and using information that you gained this year to use on the same day or within a few days of the same day next year, and so on and so forth. And kind of worked a deal out with him to do a habitat plan. And the difference between what Jim recommended doing with the place and what Don recommended with the place were they basically had the same objective, but the way to go about it was totally different. So I saved a little bit of money and made a deal with Jeff Sturgis to come and take a look at the property, and he did. We made, he drew a map and made suggestions, which was, something even totally different than what Jim had talked about and what Don recommended. I don't know if Jim Brauker is still doing them, but as of a few years ago, he'd actually do a plan based off of an aerial. And so you give him the address, he'd look up your property, talk to you on the phone for a half an hour, and then he'd make some recommendations and a plan, call you back. It's kind of the early Zoom calls, actually, where you could talk to him and you would see his cursor on his computer, and it was kind of it was kind of cool at the time that you weren't doing a lot of that. And so his property or his evaluation was real similar to Jeff's and somewhat similar to Jim's recommendations, but still totally different from Dawn. So that's when I really realized that there's a lot of great land managers, and some of them come at the equation with a slightly different angle, but basically they're all trying to do the same thing. They're all trying to, make it so that the property meets your objectives, whether it's, I don't care if I see very many deer on the property, but I'd really like to see one big buck every year, or, I'd like to turkey hunt just as much as I do whitetails. So, whatever we do has to be good for the turkeys as well. And so in taking what I've learned from everybody that I've dealt with, from all the reading that I've done, the classes that I've taken, I basically, what I've decided is that each property obviously is unique and it's different, but each property owner has different objectives. And one thing I think I've seen is it looks like a lot of the property managers or the folks that are offering to help people, they say, okay, your 40 acres, in order to make it the best it can be for whitetails, you need to do, put a food plot here, put bedding here, make sure, your borders are thick, and, never set foot here, and access your tree stands from this direction. And then that's it. It's just it's a cut and dry, black and white. This is your treasure map for success. But what I've realized in talking to a lot of people is that there we go, we're back. What I've realized is that everybody has totally different objectives, and that can affect where, can affect where food plots should be. It affects stand placement, whether edges should be thick or not, whether, you need to focus your time on figuring out stand locations that you can get in and out without bumping deer. Anyway, so I know one of your questions was, how do you differ from other land managers? And to give you an example, I've not had very good luck here in shooting deer really early in the season. October, when it's hot and it's buggy, I don't even really want to be in a tree stand. We have soybeans and corn everywhere. So, finding, a mature buck that you want to harvest while he's still on a feeding pattern, say the first 2 weeks of October, and getting between his bedding and his food hasn't really been an option for me. But I'm fascinated by scrapes. I'm fascinated by the way deer use them to communicate. And so I really like hunting deer the last 2 weeks of October and the first week of November, because the rut gets crazy, it gets unpredictable. Bucks end up with does, and then you don't see them for a couple of days. And when you do see them, they're running 60 miles an hour to where they disappear for another couple of days. And then I don't enjoy sitting in a tree stand when it's bitter cold, hunting over, say, standing corn or soybeans that are still in the pod. So for me, my property is set up with the idea of taking advantage of that last 2 weeks of October and first week of November. And then the rest of the year, I'm just kind of watching and seeing what's working and what's not, and figuring out how to make adjustments for next year, figuring out how what I've learned is going to help me with the next person that I'll help. And Another example is I've got a guy that I'm going to help in the next couple of weeks. I'm supposed to go to his property and help him draw up a plan. And he's got a real nice property. It's pretty good size. He's already got a couple thickets, and his goal is, I just want to shoot a big buck every year. So all of our effort is going to be figuring out how to hold and kill a big buck. Now I've got another guy that's not very far from here that I'm doing consultation with, actually through the group, and he's actually as excited about bobwhite quail, turkeys, and doesn't really care. I mean, he's a deer hunter, but he hasn't shot a deer in a couple of years, and he's just happy to see wildlife. So, we gotta, with his openings, we're gonna do some stuff, probably with some grasses and things that will complement the bobwhite that are already in the area, but maybe aren't using his land specifically. Probably going to do, because it's not a huge piece of property, we're probably going to do some grass borders so that the deer that are in his property feel safe, because there's walls around them, so to speak. So I mean, there's an example of two properties with totally different outlooks. And so the plans will be drawn up totally differently to help the landowner hunt it exactly the way they want to hunt it. So,
yeah, that's a great approach, and that's something that I think about. Sometimes people say, they might say something bad about some managers and say, "Oh, this guy puts out cookie cutter plans for different properties," and I don't even know if you could possibly do that. I mean, that's the first thing I think everybody asks their client is, "What are your goals?" I mean, everybody has to start with that, because, like you said, some guys want to shoot big deer, some guys want to have their kids ride their dirt bikes through there all summer. So it's just all dependent. And yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that.
Yeah, it's definitely important to find out what goals are. When it comes to managing the timber, some folks, logging it, every 15 years on the money is, very important to some people, and other people it's like, well, we'll log it when it needs it, but it doesn't need to be managed specifically for timber. And so yeah, everybody's got a different take on how they want to use the property. And I think if you have techniques in mind, and you look at the property and say, okay, my techniques involve doing bedding here, food plots here, travel corridors, whatever. Well, that may be what's worked on the last 5 or 10 properties you consulted on, but it may not work for this property owner, because they're going to hunt it different, or they want to hunt a different time of the year. I mean, if somebody, like, I've got a neighbor who, he farms, and he doesn't get to hunt a lot of times until mid to late November. And, if Mother Nature doesn't cooperate, sometimes he's not in the field till, closer to Christmas. So, he's got standing corn and beans with electric fence around it. So, he can basically open up a buffet late in the year and not have to worry about the fact that the deer ate all of his soybeans before they could even put on pods in July and August, and I've got a very extensive system of scrapes from one end of my property to the other, and all these different wagon wheel spokes of scrapes all end in one place, in one of my favorite stands that I don't sit very often, but it's a spot that when the timing's right and all the conditions work out, it's almost as predictable as the sun coming up.
Yeah, so let's pivot into that. Let's talk about the past that you've had with the habitat management, and you've seen enough properties and had enough clients now. What kind of has shaped you and what you focus on now?
What has shaped me? and that I focus on now? Well, again, it's figuring out, what time of the year the client wants to utilize the property, whether they're, strictly a bow hunter, or they want to, hunt, the whole deer season. Those things are all super important. And so, the stuff that I've learned about scrapes, helps me. I guess I won't encourage a client to maybe put as an extensive of a scrape system in as I've got if they're going to hunt in November and December. I guess ask me the question again. Maybe I'm not going the direction you were looking.
No, you're fine. I was just curious, like what kind of, like, sort of your specialties that have grown over the years, like some things that you've seen have worked, some that you haven't, and how that's kind of shaped you, and what your specialties are and what you're focusing on now, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. Scrapes are definitely one of my specialties. I really enjoy them. I've got some great, I bought some inexpensive trail cameras that work real good in video mode. They shoot a 15-second video when something triggers them. I've got some really great videos without sound of deer working scrapes. I did some tests one year where I experimented with different types of licking branches. I used the hemp or the natural fiber rope, grapevines, and then of course just tied down limbs on oak trees and other branches that were already about the right height, that maybe been used in the past, but they busted them off with their antlers and they were now, too high to reach. So we're tying those down. I've got 16 and a half acres of CRP on my 77 acres. So I've seen how how much of a benefit the CRP has made to my hunting and bedding and basically just habitat in general for the deer, versus them being 1 year soybeans, the next year corn, and so much of the year they sit, it's just a big empty muddy field sitting there that doesn't help the wildlife. So I've dealt with the CRP and WRP system a little bit. So I understand that, and that's certainly if the income you're making off of that government program is equal to or similar to what you're getting in crop share, yet it's beneficial to the wildlife year round, versus a few months here in the summertime if it's beans, and maybe a couple months in the fall where it's great cover for deer to hide. It's a win-win. You're getting the same money, but it's, it benefits the wildlife more of the year. I absolutely love snow fence. It's not very tall. You can order it off Amazon. You can find it just about anywhere. It's basically, if you're not familiar with it, it's basically little slats of wood that are all held together with wire. They're typically not very tall, about usually 3.5, 4 feet. So deer can jump over them without really exerting much energy, but because they're lazy, they have a tendency to walk around them. And so, if you've got a spot, like I've got one, the location, the hub where all my scrapes meet is kind of a big opening, and it's further across the opening than I want to shoot. So if a buck walks and skirts the edge of that opening, he's going to walk by out of range. So what I did was I took 50 feet of the snow fence, and I took it into the woods. I hinged and knocked down a bunch of trees and junk stuff. Then I started the fence, and I basically just came from that woods 50 feet out into the opening. Now, 42 feet of it comes out in the opening, and the rest of it's in the woods to keep the deer from wanting to go around it the other direction. And it does make, food plotting in that area a little bit more of a pain in the butt. But what it does is it gets all those deer coming out around it, and with the scrape or double scrape built right into the end of the fence, what it does is it puts a deer half the distance of the opening and broadside when they're smelling licking branch, working the scrape, whatever. And I mean, it's something that I did in an afternoon, and it's like a whole season game changer. And the deer responded to it just, right now. There's no trails around it. They all come out into the food plot. They just walk around it. I've taken it one step further and actually put a water hole right at the base, at the edge of the food plot closest to the stand. So now I've got the deer narrowed into now they can't walk close to me where I may or may not be able to shoot them because of branches in the tree and that kind of thing. So now I've made the only place to travel across this food plot right in the middle where it's, 20 to 35 yards. And
I think it's awesome. I think what your specialty, for lack of a better term, like Jesse in Iowa, right? He's really good at the prairie, the drilling, natives. He loves all that, and he's phenomenal at it. And Zach up in Wisconsin, he's got ponds, right? If we have a question about ponds, like we call Zach. I think what's cool about this whole team is that we all have our niches in different areas, but as a team, we're all looking at everybody's plan, right? So we're going to be looking at each other's plans and putting our blessings on them.
Yep.
Hey, have you thought about this? And Phil's going to say, hey, did you put a scrape here? Or maybe snow fence right there, or maybe Jared would have thought inch cutting or switchgrass or maybe an annual screen. So it's pretty awesome. I like your mind and my mind are very similar in the terms of the mousetrap, I think, and doing that perfectly. And then again, it's a couple of things you just mentioned there. Those are simple things, but if you don't know where to put them or how to set it up, you don't. It's just things that you learned over time,
Right. And, I don't think there's any, you'll hear some land managers say, I've heard it, all you want's one scrape on your property so that you can put a camera on it, every deer on the property is going to use it. And so then you can do your inventory. But, I want deer to enter if they're not living on my property or not bedding on my property, I want deer to enter my property and then spend a lot of time on it. And with bucks in late October and early November, and I mean, this is a Tony LaPratte thing. I want him to stop and use multiple scrapes over time. I don't feel like by having multiple scrapes, I'm not getting pictures of every buck that's using my property. I just put my cameras in the right place and or on a couple of different scrape lines where I've covered everything, because I've got video of, say, a man-made scrape, or let's just say a natural scrape. I've got a location in one of my bottoms where there's like 3 small oak trees together. They all have limbs that are about the same height. I've tied them all down. And every year I end up with 3 or 4 scrapes under those 3 oak trees. And what happens is I've got video of one buck comes in, hits the first scrape, rubs on the licking branch, licks it, rubs it on his forehead, takes a leak in the scrape. And then what he does is he goes and he smells the other licking branch, maybe smells the ground, maybe doesn't, goes to the next one. Maybe all he does there is smell the ground, and then he moves on. Well, then you got another buck coming from the other direction. He smells the licking branch on the first one, smells the ground, comes over to the middle, rubs on this licking branch, pees in this one, and doesn't even smell the third one and keeps on walking. So, I mean, I don't think there's a one size fits all to any of this. I don't think there's anything that's carved in stone. And I think I think the more willing to try different things, one, you're learning all the time. And I don't know. I've had really good luck with lots of scrapes, and I'll continue to put, no kidding, I'll continue to put 30 or 40 a year on my place. I've probably got, I don't know, I've probably got close to 100 now. If you figure, man-made branches that have been tied down, to put them at that ideal height. I've experimented with, putting posts, a cedar post in at an angle and putting a scrape off of that. I've got a couple cedar posts where the deer almost rubbed the post in half. So it became a rubbing post in addition to a scrape. Just trying different things.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Jared and I talk a lot about with some of our clients that we're never going to do anything that you can't reverse. So that's like you mentioned, always trying new things to see what works. And say you put in 100 scrapes or 50 scrapes on your property, it's not going to hurt anything. If they don't work, they'll abandon them, or you can tear them down or whatever you want to do.
Exactly. I mean, if the deer don't use them, it's not like they're spooked by them, or it's not like there's something else your habitat is missing something because you put a scrape there. If you hadn't put a scrape there, it would be a food plot or whatever. It's just, if they don't use it, they don't use it.
Right.
It's not hurting anything. And in my experience, now I haven't put cameras on all of them, obviously, but one year I ran 5 cameras for a month and a half, and I threw away hundreds and hundreds of videos of bucks working scrapes that were, either smaller bucks, or there just wasn't anything about it that was new or different or interesting. I've got bucks coming and using scrapes with another buck literally standing behind him, waiting for him to leave so he could work it.
Wow.
I basically figured out that I think anything in the way of a vine that's any bigger around than, say, your thumb seems less desirable than one that's, say, the size of your little finger. And I don't know if it has to do with flexibility, or if it's because when they work it with their nose, the heavier vine doesn't move as much because of weight. But I can tell you that I really like the natural fiber rope. And I feel like in the videos I've watched, the deer I've seen using them and that kind of thing, that it seems like they spend more time rubbing, smelling, and enjoying the rope than they do a natural branch or a vine or whatever. And I don't know if it's because the rope is so porous and there's more scent there. I've got one that I posted on my Facebook page that was one of the original ones I put in, one of the original ones I did with rope back in 2013. It's still there. It's hanging, and it looks like a horse's tail because it's just shredded. And I got video of deer literally chewing on them, smelling them, rubbing on them, and then chewing on them, physically putting them in their mouth, and like you can see them like grinding it up.
Now, what size rope are you using compared to the vines you were talking about?
So the Wenzel brothers were actually the ones, to my knowledge, that started back in the 80s with the rope. And what they said was they liked 3/4 of an inch was kind of their, if I remember correctly. It's been a long time since I read it, but it seems to me it was in the 3/4 inch range is what they liked. They felt if you got much heavier than that, it was kind of like the vine, where it was just less desirable for whatever reason. And if it was too light, it didn't have enough weight that when they rubbed on it, it would actually rub. You'd keep bumping it, but it would never rub. It's just too light. I've had good luck with rope up to 7/8 of an inch, an inch. I haven't really noticed that the heavier rope seems to be less desirable, like the heavier grapevine. But again, in order to actually run numbers and actually, make a bar graph and everything, you'd have to have a lot more information than I do. And so, these are just kind of hunches and assumptions I'm making based on what I'm seeing and, how much the deer enjoy using one over the other, and consistency and that kind of thing is where I've come up with those, those theories.
I think that you're right. And I know that our friend Jordan uses ropes a lot as well. I think it's all, I get the word right now. It's all depends on where you're at too. I haven't tried one yet, so I'm going to try one before I rule this out. But I think other things might work better around where I'm at, or vice versa, right? It's all about, you always say it's just a tool in your toolbox, but you guys make the rope thing look sexy. I'm telling you. And then the 45 poles that you put them on, I didn't see that till I met you, so that's just some cool things here that you, and that's why, like, your area, so it's pretty cool. Pretty cool to hear the success you're having. And then look at the bucks on your wall, I mean, it's like,
the pole thing and the angle actually came from the story I told in episode 36, where my buddy up in Michigan pulled the tree over, and then every deer in the world rubbed on it because of the new angle. I think that's why horizontal rubs have become so popular. I think if you give a buck a choice between a standing tree straight up and down, vertical, or something that's leaning, or something that's horizontal, all else being equal, I think they'll pick the leaning or the horizontal, because I think it's more conducive. I think the angle's better for them. I think they can do what they want to do on it better than just this straight up and down. I think it's just I don't think it's as natural of a movement. And I think something that's coming out at them where they can rub like this versus trying to rub up and down. I mean, maybe it's kind of silly, but it just makes sense to me. And when you see deer using them, it makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned the Wenzel brothers; those guys were ahead of their time. Gene and Barry were steering deer with blockades and way ahead of their time on videos and things. So it always makes me chuckle when I hear guys try to say, "Oh, I coined this," or "I invented this," and in the 2000s or whatever. But these guys have been doing it for 30, 40 years.
Yeah, there's probably not anything out there that hasn't been tried. It's just that, social media and the internet has made things more popular, and made things, made it possible to show the world what you're doing. Talk Miles Keller, and heck, a lot of hunters today don't even know who Miles Keller was. I mean, that guy was a big buck killing machine back when there was no trail cameras, and I mean, this guy just killed big bucks because he was a good woodsman, and he had passion. And I mean, I'd give anything to spend a weekend in deer camp with that guy, picking his brain. It's a shame that he's gone off that he's kind of gone off the grid. I heard that, he used to make the show circuit for years and years, and he had a trailer with all of his mounts, all of his big deer in it, and it got stolen at a show.
Yeah, I remember that.
He lost everything, and he just it just soured the whole thing on him, and he just went into quit going to shows and quit. The unfortunate part of it is, other than the obvious, is that the guy never wrote any books or did any videos. I don't think a lot of his information will ever get passed on. A lot of his history, a lot of his achievements. I mean, you can look in the record books, or you can probably Google him and see pictures of all the big bucks that he killed back in the day, when you didn't, like I said, have trail cameras and all these things that have made deer hunting more predictable. But he was the man. I mean, that guy was getting it done when nobody else, was. He knew,
Yeah.
he knew mature whitetails. I mean, guy's a legend.
I seem to remember maybe a couple of magazine articles, but like you said,
Yep.
not a whole lot out there from him for sure. So I want to pivot into what you got going on this year, some of your projects coming up, or maybe some recent projects that you had gotten completed.
Yeah. So this summer I just built a water hole in that one food plot, neck of the field. CRP was where it's where the old field, when I turned the old ag field into CRP, there was a neck that came out that dropped off into timber on both sides. And I kept that neck out of production and out of CRP. And I put in apple and pear and chestnut trees around the perimeter and kind of down through the center. And so the water hole kind of became just another gosh, I don't know what the right word is. Just another way to focus and funnel deer, I guess is the best way to put it. It made that stand more predictable. It's another reason that there's more days out of the season, I guess you could sit that stand because of another feature that gives you the advantage, I guess is what I'm trying to say. One thing, so my wife and I, a little over a year ago, bought 50 acres across the border in Illinois, and I bought it with the intent for it to kind of be a little bit of another place to experiment. Indiana's a $1 state, so there's been lots of years where I tagged out in, say, late October, early November, and then you're just kind of sitting around going. I mean, there was times when I flew down from Alaska, took 3 weeks off, and came down ready to hunt, shot a deer in 2 or 3 days, and then I'm twiddling my thumbs for 2.5 weeks. You don't want to go running out into the habitat and doing habitat work and scare what deer you didn't shoot off into the neighbors. So, I come down and I'm, helping buddies carry theirs out, or I'm going and sit in a stand and videoing for somebody else. So anyway, in Illinois, you can still harvest 2 bucks. So that gave me another option. It gave me another place to experiment. The state manages their deer better. They have a better, they've got more mature deer, even though it's only, the way the crow flies, it's only maybe 20 miles from me. It's managed totally different from a government level. And so it's 50 acres, it's 25 tillable, 25 basically woods. My plan and my goal was to put the majority of the tillable into some sort of a government program, so it's still generating some money. But now that property, my intention is to, here at my place in Indiana, I basically have the doe factory that everybody talks about, and I'm okay with it because the last 2 weeks of October and the first week of November, all the bucks on the neighbors, and I've got one neighbor that doesn't allow any hunting, and there's always a good buck over there. I draw those bucks to my place after all those does. Now, the Illinois property, I'm going to go at it with a different mindset. I just want a mature buck to bed on that property every year. So my idea, my basic thought with that is I just need to basically make a 50 acre bedding area, because there's 150, 60, 70, 80. I mean, there's some monsters of it. I got pictures of some monsters over there. So that particular property, I've got a totally different philosophy with it, just because the quality that's around, how I'm going to hunt it. I don't live on it, so I'm not going to be spending much time, the planting trees and the The habitat work that I will do over there will be less daily or weekly work that my deer here get used to, and more systematic. I'll go to the farm in Illinois, or the 50 as I call it, and I'll work for a couple day period real hard, get a whole bunch done, and then, clear out for a couple months, go back and work on stuff. And then as we get close to deer season, I'll just stay out of it completely. On my 77 acres here, I can pretty much do habitat work year round and not vastly affect what bucks I do have on my property, and certainly don't affect the does at all. So, there's a difference in two pieces of property where I'm hunting them different, I'm setting the habitat up different, and I basically have the same philosophy. I mean, I want the same thing from both properties, but I'm doing it differently for different reasons.
Well, I think that the two philosophies kind of show your skill set, that you're able to figure that out and to adjust. And like we talked about when we might have had coffee and whatnot, you're 50, you're wanting a big deer to bed there and stay safe there. You want that, like, that's your goal. Like one or two deer you mentioned, just bed and get, like super big, which is perfect because you're not there all the time.
Right.
You're not putting pressure on it. You're not living there. I can't wait to see what happens with it, honestly. and I think that, oh, you made a comment about Illinois managing their deer better. Don't ask the guys in Illinois about that, because some of them disagree. But yeah, that's why I go to Illinois too. I hear you. I love Illinois.
You can harvest 2 bucks in Illinois, and they kill some freaking giants over there. You can only kill one in Indiana, and they kill. Obviously, they just killed the new number 2 in the world in Indiana, but I think they kill proportionately far more bigger bucks just across the border in Illinois than we do here in Indiana. And the fact that you can shoot 2 of them, Don Higgins will tell you, he's not too far from here.
It's the same story with Pennsylvania, where I live in Ohio. We go over to Ohio and think it's the greatest thing in the world. And those guys that live there will complain about how the herd's managed. So,
yeah.
So Brian, is that due to the lack of hunters? Because everybody knows Michigan and Pennsylvania has tons and tons of hunters, or is it because of the way Ohio manages differently than Pennsylvania?
So I think it's a little bit of both. It's kind of what you're exposed to and what you're used to growing up. Like you'll hear people all the time talk about, a 120 is a great buck in Pennsylvania, or a 120 is a great buck in Michigan. It is, but when you're talking mature animals, if you're wanting to shoot a 4 or 5 year old, a 4 or 5 year old anywhere is probably not going to be 120 if they can get the age on them. So we're just used to saying that in Pennsylvania, and then we think it's easier over in Ohio, which it's not. But I think it's just how what you're exposed to and how you grow up, and that's
Sure.
kind of how your outlook's shaped.
Right, that makes sense.
I think if I shoot a 4 or 5 year old deer in northern Michigan on the northern 70, and it breaks 120, I'm gonna be jacked. Yeah, but yeah, Brian's right. Like a mature deer is a mature deer, and I think we got a lot of cool things here with this team. I'm really curious to see where this goes and see.
Yeah,
we're gonna put out the best product. I'm sold on that, and I think that when you mentioned Jim in Indiana, the client that you're gonna go see soon. He likes shooting turkeys and like you said, quail, and
he's got kids and kids.
They're out there all the time.
He'd rather see his one of his kids or a grandkid shoot a deer, and they're not necessarily picky for size, and he doesn't care. So that is truly a project to make the habitat better for wildlife in general, not so much how to make a big buck walk by this tree stand, or, how to pull deer in specifically in from the neighbors or whatever. I mean, in that particular instance, we're just going to make it better for seeing, holding, and just having experiences with wildlife.
Yeah.
And Zach was my inspiration for putting in the pond in that spot down there, because, him talking about, digging these tanks or these, goldfish ponds and things like that can almost, I remember I had one in the same spot back there, and I can remember times driving by it or whatever, and there's a floating dead chipmunk in it, or, frogs that look like they, it looks like a biohazard zone. And, Zach coming on to the Habitat podcast and talking about how those can actually be more detrimental than they can be beneficial. I mean, it rang with me. It made sense. I mean, if you don't get it in a spot that catches a lot of water, you gotta fill it up. So I built mine and designed the dam in such a way that my food plot drains into it. So it's never, I mean, the thing filled up in a couple of months, and it's been right at the overflow pipe ever since. So I don't think it's ever going to become a magnet for midge gnats and encourage EHD because of the way it's been built. So yes, the team, I think, is so diverse. I think everybody's got, strengths and weaknesses, or maybe not weaknesses, but certainly strengths. And I think you take 5 sets of eyes and look at something, you're going to come up with, you're not going to miss much detail.
Yep.
Things are going to get thought through. And, one guy may say, well, I think that this should be changed in a certain way. But then somebody else says, well, remember, this particular client's not as concerned about this aspect or that aspect. So, that's why we've gone this direction. So, there can be checks and balances with the different philosophies and different opinions. So
I couldn't agree more. And I think that if anybody's listening to this and wants anybody's advice from our team, you know where to find us. And that's why we wanted to get you on here. Well, it's been too long anyways. We're gonna have you on more, but we wanted to catch up and get your, your view, your philosophy, your strategy, your specialty. And I can't wait. I'm gonna, like we talked about before, next time I go down, I'm gonna come down early or stay late or something. We're gonna see your place. And I think I think that's just gonna be awesome. We got a good thing going. Glad you're on the team. I don't think we were asking in episode 36 though what your favorite tree is. I'm almost positive we weren't asking that question yet.
You weren't. Yeah. I thought about that when I've listened to your podcast since then. And so my answer is pretty straightforward. I don't really know why. It's a multi-part answer, but I don't know why I think they're cool, but I think beech trees are kind of cool because they hold their leaves. If you can find a big one in the right location, they make a great tree to get in and hide in. I've got a bunch of them on my property that are those, they're in a pretty forested canopy. So they're not growing gangbusters because they're not getting ideal light, but they're growing well enough that they seem to be a really attractive spot for scrapes.
Oh, yeah.
Deer seem to really like them for scrapes.
And they're fairly shade tolerant when it comes to that. That's why you're seeing a bunch of them in there too.
Turkeys nest in them when they get to be giant. They have those big, huge limbs that go out horizontal. Fruit trees. I like pears over apples. They seem to have long, certain ones seem to have long drop periods, just like apples. The thing I like about pears over apples is you don't have to deal with, pears are self-pollinating. Most apples need to be pollinated, and then you don't have to deal with, cedar apple rust that you do with apples. I think I've kind of switched gears and gotten away. I mean, the original fruit trees I planted were apples, and I've got a couple of them that pile on the apples in food plots. But I think my focus has changed from apples to pears. And then when it comes to nut trees, I'm big on chestnuts. I love them. I've gotten to the point now where I buy lots of different hybrids. I buy in these nuts that are big and sweet, and I'm stratifying them and starting them myself. And I would rather plant 10 trees and kind of give them half-ass attention and have 7 or 8 of them to survive than buy 4 trees, spend a huge amount of money on them, put all the latest gadgets and fences and watering and all this. And I go out and I plant probably 30, 40 trees, whether they're fruit, chestnut, whatever, a year. And I come back and check on them. And if a year later, this chestnut's dead and this apple or this pear over here is dead, if I think they're in a good spot and I think that, one needs to be there, I just replace them. And then I move on. I don't fuss over my trees. I don't prune them. I just plant the heck out of them and let the strong survive. Yeah.
I am not much different. Keep going. If you got more.
If I had a couple of boys or even a boy that was big into hunting and I thought would maybe want to live at the farm one day and continue to hunt it and do the things that I've done to improve it, I maybe would focus on different types of oaks. But I don't know that, I've got a daughter that does like to hunt, but since she's graduated and entered the workforce, she's not doing as much of that now. And so I don't know if either one of them will ever live here. So I'm doing things that benefit me in the next 10, 15, 20, maybe I'll live another 30 years. So, when you're planting oak trees, you're planting oak trees for your kids and your grandkids. I'm planting things that are going to benefit me while I'm still alive, hopefully. But I have, as part of my invasives program that I'm doing, it's a government program like the CRP. Part of that is TSI work on the timber. And so, we're doing the crop release and, helping out the white oaks and the different types of red oaks. And I've got a lot of that naturally on my place. So, planting oaks isn't really going to make a huge difference other than maybe certain sections of the farm where there's not as many of them, but I've got places where I've got too many of them. I'm actually cutting some down so that the ones that are still there actually benefit. So when it comes to trees for me, it's kind of a 3-part answer, I guess.
I like it. I don't think we've ever had a 3-part answer. So this question just continues to surprise me. I don't know. Got to trademark it or something.
There you go. Yeah. Well, I'm I'll also tell you that I'm honored to be asked to be a part of your land manager team. I feel like I'm qualified. I don't feel like it was a gift. I don't feel like you asked me because you felt sorry for me. I think I bring plenty to the table and can hold my own, with all the different managers that I've dealt with over the years and all the schooling and research and things and all the experimenting I've done. I think I can really help somebody. And, if I ever bump into somebody that thinks that that I truly didn't help them, I'll give them their money back. That's how confident I feel in that I can help somebody. So anyway, for what it's worth.
Yeah, I think what we tell our clients that we've dealt with so far is this isn't a here's your plan, see you later, don't call me again type thing. This is I want to be talking to you in 10 years, 20 years, as long as you own the property. Brian always says it. As long as you own the property, we are at your disposal. And
Give a holler.
Yep.
We'll do our best. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. We want to be the opposite of ignoring people and never calling them back and that sort of thing. So
yeah, it's frustrating. I mean, it's a customer service business, and you have to remember that, successful businesses, word of mouth, makes a huge difference. And happy customers tell their friends, that's the way it works.
We get a lot of clients that like text message us, and that's fantastic. I mean, it doesn't take but a few seconds to text somebody back and answer a question.
Sure. Absolutely. Yep.
Well, Phil, I want to thank you very much for your time tonight. This is a great episode here to launch and people learn more about you. And again, guys, go back to 36. It's a home run episode. Ignore me if I was an amateur back then, or if we sounded a little rustier than we do now, it's probably because we were. So don't worry about that.
I still sound like that.
You gotta start. Yep. You absolutely got to start somewhere. Yeah. I don't think there was any rusty about it. No. and back then in 36, that was me talking about how to manage a property from afar. And so for somebody that has a piece of property in a different state than where they live, that's a good episode to go back and see how there's certain things when you can only be at the property for short periods of times. There's certain things you should focus on.
Yep.
And it may not be food plots. Everybody thinks that food plots are the answer, and they're a big part of the equation, but depending on timing, you're better off to work on natural browse than take your time off and plant a food plot that doesn't grow because you put it in the wrong time of the year and it didn't get rain and it all shriveled up. Now you just wasted a week where, if you just spent a week increasing, encouraging the natural browse, you can create way more food there than a failed food plot. This is an example. So, and I don't know that it was kind of spelled out quite like that, but I do remember the gist of that episode was, how do you manage from afar?
Yeah, I think that was actually in part of the title, was how to manage from afar. So at least we put it there. At least we put it in that part.
Hey, and I'm telling you, I'm going to go on the record here in front of God and everybody and tell you, the next time you drive across 70 where you're a stone's throw from my house and you don't stop through, you're going to catch hell.
I only made that mistake once. I won't do it again. No, it was good seeing you down there. Thanks for the coffee. I do appreciate that. And
absolutely.
You'll be seeing me soon.
Great talking to both of you. Brian, it's always a pleasure. And I look forward to a little bit of off and on roundtable stuff with the plans in the future. So I'm excited to be a part of the team.
And we are happy to have you, and good luck with Jim coming up. Let us know how it goes, and I'm sure it'll be awesome. So,
yep. Sounds good, guys.
Thanks, Phil.
Yep. You got it. Bye-bye.
Thank you.